All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Sumitra Gunalin, the Marketing Communications Executive at Sage. And together with me is Geraldine Sim, Marketing Manager at Sage. We're delighted to have you join us today at our webinar titled The University Students' Mental Health Toolkit with Professor Gretchen Geng and Dr. Leigh Disney, hosted by Sage. A little bit about Sage and some housekeeping before we get started. Sage is a global independent publisher at the forefront of research and scholarship. Our mission is building bridges to knowledge, supporting the development of ideas through the research process to scholarship that is certified, taught, and applied across all fields of social science. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available for public view on our Sage Asia Pacific YouTube channel after the event. There will be a short Q&A session towards the end of the webinar for anyone who might have any questions for our speakers. You can raise your questions by clicking on the Q&A or sending a message to the webinar's host and speakers directly. If we were unable to get around to answering any questions during our webinar, we will endeavor to respond via an article on our Sage Asia Pacific blog, so stay tuned for that. If you have a minute to spare after the webinar, please let us know if by completing a quick survey that will appear at the end to let us know how did we go. Upon completion of the survey, you'll be entered into a lucky draw where 3 lucky participants will receive an exclusive limited edition Sage Tule backpack. Now I'll be passing over to Geraldine. Over to you.
Thanks, Sumitra. So finally, we're super excited to introduce our speakers to you today. Gretchen Geng is a professor in innovative education futures at Flinders University. Gretchen has been a senior management member at universities for over 10 years, including deputy head of school in the School of Education, Victoria Melbourne campus, and the head of discipline early childhood education at Australian Catholic University. Executive director / vice president of international groups in Beijing Foreign University Studies, the academic lead at the DVC Education Office of RMIT University, and an associate professor in pedagogy and learning at Charles Darwin University. Dr. Leigh Disney is an early years lecturer within the Faculty of Education at Monash University. Prior to this, he was an early childhood lecturer at Charles Darwin University. During this time, Leigh has worked with both undergraduate and postgraduate students across the field of international student education. Both Professor Geng and Dr. Leigh are authors of the title Your Guide to Wellbeing at University, one of the power-packed titles in our Student Success series of essential guides for students. You can check out more of the book or discover more titles in the series by scanning the QR codes you see on the screen right now. So without further ado, I'll pass the screen over to our speakers to go through the session on University Students' Mental Health Toolkit. Over to you.
Thank you, Geraldine. I'm going to share my PowerPoint. Just want to double check. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Perfect. We are very delighted today to present you a webinar hosted by Sage on the University Students' Mental Health Toolkit. We would like to start our webinar by acknowledging the First Nations and traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we are presenting. We pay our respect and recognize their contributions to Australia and global society. So I would like to start with the background information about us first. So I'm Gretchen, and that's my co-presenter, Dr. Leigh Disney. We are education, sorry, I'm just going to the second slide, sorry. We are education specialists, and we have been working over 20 years each in higher education universities, teaching and researching thousands of university students. This webinar is connected with a research project we conducted back in 2021 and 2022. So this project we found had a lot of rich evidence-based practices from our education students and other discipline students, first-hand learning and living experiences. Leigh, do you have anything you would like to add for the next slide?
No worries. Thank you, Gretchen. So, yeah, my name is Dr. Leigh Disney. I am from Monash University. As you would imagine, with a surname like Disney, what other career could I have chosen but gotten into early childhood? So I feel very like I was predestined and determined to become an early childhood lecturer. I also worked in childcare for 10 years, so there you go. It's sort of predetermined by the name. But yeah, we do have a lot of experience together, Gretchen and I, in terms of our work in higher education institutions. And so the opportunity to write this book was actually fortuitous and also somewhat therapeutic, I believe, for both of us to sort of reflect on our careers so far working in higher education. And actually, I was looking at the attendees list a little bit earlier, Gretchen, and I could see some of my own PhD students and colleagues have attended here today, so it's lovely to see everybody who was able to make it. So maybe the next slide, Gretchen. Okay, so earlier you were asked, the attendees were asked if they could provide some responses to the following questions. So, what aspects of mental health are you most interested in learning about? And is there any question that you would like the speakers to address during the webinars? Now, the great thing about both of those is that the word clouds highlight the importance of our students. And so for Gretchen and I, we're very student-centered, very student-focused. We both love our interactions in higher education, in teaching and learning. I know for me, when I transitioned out of working with very young children to sort of teaching the teachers, it took some time to get used to, but it's a wonderful journey to and a privilege actually to work in higher education institutions and interact with so many different students. Now, I don't know if, like Gretchen said, we've taught thousands, but I know at least a few hundreds, definitely. Maybe it is thousands by now. My
Combined.
gosh, we're aging ourselves badly. Um, but you can see there, what are the aspects in terms of thinking about, and you can see another one of the highlighted words there is anxiety, stress, intervention, strategies, well-being. So those are the sorts of things that certainly resonated with us over our journey of working with higher education students, but also understanding that sometimes those components actually are part of life. And so because they're part of life, we have to learn strategies that can sort of help us to deal with those things when they arise. And so that's sort of where we come from in that stance. Now, we're going to get to a few of the strategies that we recommend in the book today as well, but we also want to give you a grounding in sort of the complexities of what it means to be a higher education student at differing levels. So not just at an undergraduate level or a postgraduate, sort of thinking holistically about a university experience, but then also what is life beyond university? And for many students, that sort of transition to what becomes after university finishes is also quite overwhelming. One of the keys to remember when we discuss today is that we're not trained psychologists or counselors. That's not our job. Yeah, we're not here and we can't provide medical advice or things about those natures of things that trained psychologists and counselors do. But what we can do is draw upon that, sort of 40 years of combined experience working in education and to think about sort of what are the strategies that we've seen from the students that we've worked with, but more systematically, what happened when we did the research? So when we actually went about, systematically doing that, what did the students tell us from all over the world? And so this is our opportunity in the webinar to be able to share sort of that information with you. So thank you, Gretchen. Back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leigh. I think I'm going to start with, before we're going to share with you about the toolkit, we would like to talk about the aims first, because all the things comes with the aims. In our project, we did the project in pandemic time. We have noticed many university students have lagged behind their studies. At that time, we know a lot of universities have their own wellness and well-being services or strategy schemes for their students, but we still found a lot of students at that time were either not using them at all, I mean the strategies at all, or found the strategies not very useful in their own daily lives. So we start to wonder, we start to develop a project with three aims. So what you can see, the first one is about what the stresses experienced by university students. And while we are investigating the stresses, we're also trying to locate some successful energy building strategies used by the university students themselves. And we found that a lot of those strategies actually can be frameworked into a very good model to help a lot of many other students to develop and maintain their energy building during the university life and beyond the university, and how these strategies actually interweave into each other to support energy renewal. So even though me and Leigh, we both are not, clinical psychologists or counselor, but we really believe the energy building or energy renewal strategies we actually developed into this toolkit will help many university students. And we use these aims as a guide to develop a well-being framework and energy renewal mental health toolkit. So now I'm going to move on to the next slide and pass it to Leigh.
So, and before I read what is on the screen right now, which is actually a quote from our book, I can so distinctly remember I was working with an undergraduate student, and the story of this student is actually transposed in the book anyway. So if you do have an opportunity to read it, you'll be able to hear the story a little bit. But I remember the student came to me and you could tell he was stressed. Like he was like, I'm not really don't know what to do with this assessment. Everything's drama. And I said, it's okay, it's okay. Come in, let's discuss it. And he looked at me like I was crazy. I was like, what's up? And he said, I can't come in now. I was like, why? Why can't you come in now? Have you got a class? He's like, no, no, no. I have to go for a surf. I was like, okay, so you need to go surfing. He said, yeah, if I don't go for a surf, I just won't be able to concentrate. I can't ask the right questions. I won't be able to take in what you said. I said, okay, go for your surf. I'll still be here till 5. If you're back, if you're back by then, come and see me. And he was. And then everything about his demeanor changed. Like he was just calm, composed, relaxed. And it was before we wrote the book. And I remember telling Gretchen this story. And then Gretchen had done some other work around sort of well-being, and so we sort of saw the potential and thinking about energy in different ways. Because for this person who's in the book, his name is Bill. For Bill, he just had to release that physical energy that was inside of him before he could move forward. And then back to the quote on the screen. We live in fast times, and then changes in the digital world have pushed us to work to our utmost to meet all different kinds of requirements or expectations. Our daily lives are crammed with bits and pieces of juggling study, family, and work. And what that sort of equates to, and it's something I think many of us can feel, there's just never enough time in a day. Like you're just constantly on the go, like all the time. And it speaks to the sort of chaotic nature of life, but it also speaks to the transitional component of now what we all face post-COVID. Sometimes I feel like COVID was not real, like it was something that happened like in another lifetime or another generation, but it certainly didn't. It wasn't that another lifetime, it was just a couple of years ago. But as a society and within our communities, we still feel the effect of that. And for example, at Monash, we just predominantly did face-to-face teaching. So it was all, you'd come to class, but we've transitioned to blended and hybrid approaches and doing all different things because students were like, you know what? we actually don't mind being online. It actually works for us really well. And so all of a sudden, as university lecturers, we were like, oh, okay, what do we do now? And so it's not just from a student perspective, also the sort of infrastructures around universities and higher education have had to equate to what are changing in different times. So from that perspective, we know that everything is fluid, everything moves, but it can be seem chaotic, and that's why we need to be able to work towards building sort of the skills that can help us to navigate different components of what it is that we do. So thank you, Gretchen. I'm back over to you.
Thank you. So as what you can see, we have discussed a little bit about the background of, university students' life. We talked a little bit about pandemic and post-pandemic. Again, going back to what we are going to do, why we need to do it suddenly becomes so important to us. So we wanted to tap into our higher education students' stresses. And then in order for us to understand what we are really going to look into, we did a comprehensive critical review of the current literature. And we found, interestingly, university students have significantly higher stress levels than the general population. And although many researchers acknowledge the differences among the demographic backgrounds of university students, for example, we have, the school leavers, we have different year level of university students because, first year, second year, final year students are experiencing very different stressors. We have mature age students. We have returning students, like whoever's completed undergraduate degree and coming back to university to study postgrads. We have HDR students. We have higher, research students. We have international students coming from another country to study in different countries. We have undergrads, we have postgrads, we have many, many, many varieties of university students. They are all experiencing different stresses. But when we did the critical review, we found the most influencing factors actually including the 4 different areas. So the first one is academic performance. Whether they are having a higher grade or a lower grade will really determine their well-being level, which makes sense. If you got a distinction or high distinction, your confidence, your self-efficacy, your social emotional levels all being, the energy is really, really high. But if you have a fail or if you're marginally passed, that really going to impact on your wellness or well-being. And we also tapped into the social collaboration parts. Say, most of the university studies will include group work, group assignments. Some of the students prefer to work in groups and while the others do not. And these kinds of working style or studying style will really put a little bit of stress to some students, especially if they have to collaborate online with some other students assigned by the lecturers, for example, randomly, they do not know they are, and starting from, being a colleagues and peers and probably later friends and assignments grouped together. So that's involved a lot of social collaboration. And of course, technical readiness, like even though some little trick, kinds of activities like, can we access library? Can we access learning management systems? Is any broken link really irritates our, students' well-being? Or if the students contact the lecturers and expect them to return their email like within seconds or waiting for 3 or 4 days will really impact on their well-being. And same as a peer-to-peers learning. So if we have students actually learning together and sometimes they can't communicate with each other, not like face-to-face, you can see each other, every week, for example. But if you have to do that complete online, how that would look like. And if we have HDR students, research students, who we haven't seen for the whole, because of COVID pandemic, we haven't seen for the whole maybe 1 or 2 years, we only meet them online in the way, where that also impact on their well-being as well. And finally, Some students have conflicting other commitments, like they probably will have family commitments because they are primary carer of their children or their parents, or they also have some social life commitments, like, if they are the leader or chairman of a local sports club, for example, they could also interfere with their what kinds of stressors they might encounter when they're going through studies. And a lot of students are doing part-time work or full-time work and doing part-time studies. And these kind of job and life and financial commitments also put a lot of stress to our students. So these are the 4 common areas we found. It's actually, we use them as a why or as a background, as a literature background for us to check in, for us to really understand what we are really looking to for our project. Now I'm going to move on to Leigh, and he's going to talk about university students' life and build the context constructs. Thank you, Leigh.
Yeah. So building off what Gretchen has just told you about that, so when we were analysing our data as well and looking for sort of those systems that are in place and those sort of constructs that sort of facilitate students' well-being and sort of their goals and expectations, we could see that there was environmental level constructs. So in the diagram on the left-hand side, you can see there we're talking about things such as home and family environments, but we are fully aware that there no two students are exactly alike, and so everyone's an individual. We have our own stories, our own journeys. And so, for example, in our data, would the constructs from that sort of home family environment were speaking things like parent support, sibling dynamics, academic support, social support from the home and family. But I also so vividly recall when I was an undergraduate student, I had a friend who had moved from the country, and she didn't have the home and family environment and support where she was studying. And so it became like really sort of overwhelming just from that not having that home and family environment at that very beginning stage of her studies. Now, over the course of 4 years of doing an undergraduate degree, she was able to find other ways of sort of navigating those spaces. But we also appreciate that not for everybody they have the same levels of sort of these constructs that we're going to be talking about. But it's not just what happens at home in the environmental context. It's also what's happening in the university. And Gretchen was sort of highlighting that as well. And one of the things that sort of resonates when you work in these institutions, and again, we're both very fortunate because we work at really places where we love to work. And for me at Monash, I know I'm surrounded by really high quality teachers and lecturers who are around me that I know I can sort of rely on and be supported by. And so from a student perspective, when they're in that sort of environment and culture, it makes such a difference. Student autonomy, that sort of transition that we've experienced for many universities from the face-to-face to online to hybrid to whatever that means. And then the sort of expectations that universities place on students in terms of trying to get them prepared for what comes for life after their sort of journey. And often those are reflected too in policy documents and those spaces where they try to facilitate expectations around staff, around students, around administration. So lots of different dynamics there. But then that then moves on to the individual level constructs. So thinking about self-concept. So that could come back to your identity in terms of gender identity, your cognitive development, social, emotional, socioeconomic status, how you see yourself, and seeing yourself sort of as a university student and what that actually means. And so, for example, that student that I was talking about that I studied with, she didn't see herself initially as a university student. She saw herself as somebody who'd moved from the country, had to adjust to city life, and that was the preeminent occupation for her in those early stages, was that it was too overwhelming to be dealing with this level of change. And then through systems that she was able to develop, she then was able to get comfortable, finish her degree, and then went on to be an amazing teacher herself. but then also the academic level from an individual construct level. So the motivation, the prior knowledge that you have about sort of what you're studying and why you're studying it, academic competence, can you write and at an academic level already, or is it something you need to develop as you're moving forward? Self-efficacy, academic interest, and we know that that goes up and down. I literally had a meeting with a master's student yesterday who was like, so I don't want to read one more paper. I've just had enough. And I said, yes, 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 but you still got to do it. It's like week 11. Next week is work 12. Get back into it. But, she said, I will, I know. But she said, it's like a wave. It comes and it goes. And I said, yeah, and I understand. And I actually said, well, there's a good book I could show you if you want to get into different energy strategies. And then social relationships. And so, again, that student that I was talking to you about, the one who moved from the country to the city, those peer relationships really helped. And I'm fortunate to say I was one of those peer relationships. I was able to support her and help her, full well knowing that the transition she'd gone through is really difficult to sort of have that space and have it removed. She was a country girl, she'd always been remote Australia, and then to move to a big city it was a lot to handle. Um, and then, of course, your relationships with your academic staff and what are those founded on. And I'm very pleased to say that Gretchen and I both have take those relationships really seriously when it comes to working with students. And I know many of my colleagues do, but I also understand that there's pressures on academic staff, especially when they're teaching research and other buckets that they have to fill. And so it's like, oh my gosh, it's a lot of pressure on them too. But we know that a big part of our job is to support our student cohorts, which all then sort of leads to those final outcomes. So if the environmental level and the individual constructs are there, it leads to those outcomes. So academic performance, emotional well-being, social integration, and those are the things that came through in our study and helped us to sort of think about what constructs are important in terms of student sort of performance and their own sense of worth. Gretchen, if you could move to the next slide. To help us frame that understanding and knowing of those constructs and what it means, we actually use something called dynamic systems theory. So it helped us to understand that actually a university and the people in it are all a system. They're all interrelated, they're all doing things. And just because your home environment is not necessarily, well, it shouldn't be on the campus site, it's it becomes an outreach, yeah, of the university itself. So if you're studying at university, your home is then attached in part of that system. And actually, funnily enough, I was getting a sandwich yesterday at a shop, and I was standing next to a former student of mine. And we looked at each other and we were like, yeah, I know you and you know me, but I've just got no idea. And then I was like, didn't I teach you in something? She's like, that's right, the science unit. I was like, yeah, that's right. But see, at that point, her life has gone beyond this system that we're talking about now, university system. And so she's transitioned out of that system. But what the dynamic system allows us to do is to understand that, and it says that there on the first dot point, it provides a system to allow an agent, so a university student, to develop phase transitions from less functional to more stable learning habits and patterns. And that's what ultimately we tried to do in the book, is to help support that understanding of what that means. Um, Respond to changes in teaching and learning environments, that transition to university, what that means, the move from face to face to online. So lots of different transitions. And we understand that that journey, like it says in the dot point there, it's not linear. It just doesn't go in a straight line. You're just not going to go from being one to being the other. It's ups and downs. It's sort of chaotic in its own way. But there's a order in that chaos that hopefully when you're able to find your well-being, that you can get to that sense of who you are and what it is that you want to be as a sort of university student. Um, and well-being, we have different needs, and we understand that, and it's something in the book that we would appreciate that. Whilst in a few slides time, Gretchen is going to be able to speak to you about that a little bit deeper, but it's not the same for everybody. We each have different sort of expectations and roles. So Gretchen, if you could go to the next one. And so the way we interpreted our data and our responses was through interpretivist phenomenological analysis, which is easier to say as IPA. And we studied 35 undergraduate and postgraduate students, so from all over the world, all different disciplines. And what we did was initially contact wellbeing programs within different universities and ask them to get in contact, and then it was snowballing. And when we say snowballing, what we mean is, do you know somebody else, who would be interested in being part of this study? And that's how we got. And 35 interviews is a lot of interviews. I'm going to tell you that much. It took Gretchen and I a long time, but we call that data saturation, where you've got enough data that you know that you can sort of answer your research questions. And then we analyze them to look for the suitability to support academic learning, transition to university life, career development during your university time, and then beyond. Thank you, Gretchen. So here are some examples from the book that stood out. Now, top left-hand corner, I like hiking. It calmed me and helped me focus on what I need to do. It is a significant part of my daily life, and I would like to continue doing it. So we could see from this that the student, there's a physicality to what hiking requires of you. It's not just like a 5-minute walk from the car to the university. It's something that is rigorous and physical, but there's also a spiritual component to that, to being outside in nature and engaging with nature and what that means for our sort of well-being and holistic sort of sense of self. Secondly, I normally go to bed before midnight. I have a period of quiet time before bed and spend it on reading or other reflection activities. It helped me to maintain my health, well-being, and fitness. And potentially, that person was also speaking to things like yoga and doing something that is relaxing and moving away from screens. I do. When I was an undergraduate student, I had a lecturer. Actually, Gretchen would know this lecturer, but I'm not going to say that person's name. And he said, the last thing you should do before you go to sleep is think about your job or your work, because then you'll be thinking and dreaming about it all night. And so when I was a first undergraduate student, I used to do that. And I thought, no, 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 that's no good. So we can see here that those quiet times, those reflective times, those opportunities to remove yourself, yeah? So whether it be from university life, whether it be from social media, whether it be from technology, take those times, because those times are really important. And that came through really strongly in the participant responses. They needed time away from the bombardment of life. You know that earlier screen that I was talking to you about, where we were talking about sort of, changes in digital world and all. You need time away from those sorts of places and create those times and spaces. Thirdly, when I am behind my schedule, I become reckless with my eating. However, I found when I was eating healthily, I can focus better on my work. And that just speaks to that nature of when you're overwhelmed, when you have that sense, things seem overwhelming. So you take the shortcuts, you do the easier things. Oh, it's just easier to go get this takeaway food than it is to have to go back and cook and things like that. So once those pressures start to build, and later on, we're going to show you sort of a step-by-step guide of how you can approach thinking about moving away from negative trends that might be impacting your life. But I've been there. I know what it's like when you're like, I'll just get takeaway tonight. It'll just be easier. The kids will be happy. Everything will be fine, But then if it turns into a habit, it can build and sort of sustain to negative behaviors. So, as a mature age student, my university life was very busy. My sister is 10 years younger than me, and she would come and help to care for my children when I had to study after work. So, one of the things from the research and data that we discovered was that, especially for mature age students, they have this pre-existing life which involves partners, children, social commitments, many things. And there was that need to get support from within so that those home constructs allowed them to then get on with the university components of what they needed to do. Now, we also realize, again, saying that not all people are the same. Some will not be able to have that same level of parental support or sibling support. So, how can you go about looking for other avenues to get support? And many of the students we interviewed also spoke to things like friend relationships and sort of co-students and co-studying and working together and understanding and being accepting of the other person's lived reality. The fifth one, I have high intelligence, particularly in spatial orientation. Thus, I have been working in civil engineering for the last few years after my degree and now coming back to do a Masters of Architecture, as I do have speculation about the future of our built environment. While working, I found myself having a long focusing period and I benefited from focused tasks and working towards my goals. And I remember interviewing this particular person, and it was so fascinating that one, there was like a real career objective and a real definite plan on what it is that they wanted to do and how they wanted to achieve it. And so for this student, you could see that this focus then allowed them to concentrate on the things that they did well. And the student was very focused on, I know the career pathway, I know the career trajectory I want to take, because ultimately I have this end up goal, which is to support this component of uh, larger environmental work in sort of building and construction, which, it's great to have that goal and to be able to move through. And it really helped the students to sustain. And we know that it helps many others to have this sort of end goal and understanding of where the study is leading. And then finally, I wanted to continue my studies and felt I was at a stage of my career when I needed new challenges. I chose to focus on doctoral study, and my goal is to become an academic working in a university one day. I found it very helpful to get an understanding of what a PhD candidature looks like academically. And for us, we sort of work through that as well. We have many PhD students, and some of them are online at the moment. And that sense of just figuring out what it is and sort of that journey that you're going to go on is really important. So to walk in knowing the familiarity of what is to come. All right, back to you, Gretchen.
Thank you. So based on all these examples and stories from the participating students, we start to conceptualize the energy renewal framework for to build our well-being health toolkit. So what we actually found, all these strategies students used actually can be included in 4 different areas. They are physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. Say, for example, the physical energy building include physical activities like the students talking about hiking, and Leigh was talking about students doing surfing. And sleeping patterns, like some of the students may, an early riser, so they got up at 6 or even earlier than that. And some of the other students are sleeping a little bit later because they study or have a bit of better focus time during the nighttime. And then we also talk about the eating habits, like, when we are stressed, some students stress, just eat recklessly. But all these can impact on the physical part and how we can really help ourselves to renew these kinds of energy from physical areas. That could be part of the areas we would like to tap into. And the other areas, including emotional energy, for example, they can come from friendship, family support, and other social support as well. And mental energy can come from mental abilities, development, and also higher order cognitive performance during studies, like the architecture students. We just talk about he had shown really high order cognitive performance in this way, and that really helped him to focus into finishing his study while at the same time have really high confidence towards his own abilities to continue in working in that particular field. And finally, which is what we really want to emphasize in building our strategies or energy building strategies, is the spiritual area. What a lot of time when we're talking about spiritual, please, we don't refer to religious, we don't refer to religion. In fact, we wanted to emphasize the spiritual purpose in 3 areas, including academic purpose, including professional goals, and including personal values. When we found all these 3 big circles, the more they overlap with each other, the higher the spiritual energy you can build. So if you have a similar kind of academic purpose with your personal values and trying to achieve the professional goals at the end, if they all come together with one goal, your spiritual energy can be really high, which means there is a high chance you're gonna really succeed in your university studies. And all these areas, I put kinds of arrows on the top. They are not just a one way, or sometimes they are one way, but they also get connected, going like a circle. So going back to the dynamic system theory, they are connected and interwoven into each other. For example, physical energy can support positive impact on emotional, on spiritual energy building, from the examples we have just shown that to you. So based on these, we developed the energy renewal strategy model as shown in this diagram. So what you can see, the energy, where we can have this energy, they can come from 4 different areas, including physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And while we're building this one, we also use another dynamic system model, which is the open system model. And they are actually coming from to responding to the stressors and well-being, and from 5 perspectives that include sociological, psychological, social cultural, and developmental and spiritual different perspectives in different areas, environments, such as internal, external, and also created environments. So these are the theory part of why we developed this framework. And now we are moving on to the really fascinating and what I say, wonderful toolkit we are trying to show you here. So far, we have shared our research findings from our project with you. But now we would like to share with you how to build our energy, how we're going to really renew our energy. I mean, probably will help your students, will also help anyone who's actually wanted to renew strategies. So we developed these 4 steps of energy building strategies. They are step 1, evaluation and reflection about yourself. So myself, because I'm using the sheet myself. And step 2 is to list top study or work-related barriers, because I need to identify what has become one of our stressors. We need to look into them. We need to face our stressors. And step 3 is we are using the energy building strategy. So I'm going to show you with a good example of how we can build into the strategy, how we're going to measure that, how we're going to really them and put into a good scale so we understand, evaluate. And that's basically step 4. So we are going to rate the strategies we have used, because there are many, many different strategies. It can be aligned with what suits your needs. Probably some of the needs suit you better than other people, or even for yourself. Sometimes the strategies can be used better in your in particular period of time, but when your constructs changed, you might actually found this strategy may not be as useful as others. So we have to adjust the strategies all the time. So I would like to show you one by one. And Leigh, if you have anything to add in while I'm going through that, please help. So
Yeah, and
here's
one of the main things, Gretchen, is honesty within this process, isn't it? That's what we discovered, and we've noticed students who have used it, the more honest you are with yourself, the sort of better that these steps and these strategies work. Back to you.
Thank you. Yes, so you need to face your own stressors. You need to face and find the realistic kinds of goals for yourself so you can build your own energy. So, for example, here's an example of step one. In this evaluation sheet, the students are encouraged to look into their strengths and values because they can come from our personal values. Then they'll ask to look into someone they admire and the reasons why they are admiring these people. These strategies can help us and our students to connect with our emotional energy building as well. And they can easily find a person to turn to. This someone does not need to be a teacher or lecturer, academic or university, person. It can be anyone. It can be whoever you admire, whoever you found, etc. Can become some of the model you would like to really turn into. And students then can vision themselves. So they are going back to the spiritual energy part and trying to link their personal value and professional goals and academic purposes together. So you can write it about your current goals, your current personal vision. You probably will change your vision, monthly or yearly, or, when you're going through a big important transition period, then you change your vision. That's absolutely can be reusable in this case. Then we move on to step two. When we move on to step two, this is as what Leigh just said, we need to be very honest about ourselves. We need to identify the barriers, the possible barriers we actually have, you are or us, we are actually facing at the moment. You probably need to go into details about the, by providing yourself with example. For example, in this particular case, there is a student talking about the barriers is lack of concentration. And what is that? So she actually give herself example of can't be engaged on one task, hard to meet the due date. So the concentration period of time for this particular barrier is very clear in the way. And some other barriers, like the example shows, like, for example, little patience. What is that? Have negative feelings towards others and myself, and had low confidence in myself and others. So, the patience, a lot of time when we think about patience, probably is just like the time and, the energy we're using. But in fact, it's really going to the emotional feelings towards ourselves and others in here. And these examples provided here can really support yourself to understand the barriers or the stresses you're currently facing. And they can really help our students to set more realistic goals step by step in this way. And then we move on to step three. So step three is to set, basically we're doing the real work, the real hands-on work, is to set up the step-by-step goals by working to overcome these barriers. The slide shows we can provide possible strategies to overcome the barriers of lack of concentration by setting up good sleeping patterns. Remember, we talk about the previous barriers. We found it's really difficult to find concentration. So lack of concentration. So how I'm going to do it? In this one, we actually talk about maybe from the physical area, I would like to go to bed before 11 p.m. so I can have 7 to 8 hours of sleep instead of I'm relying on, cups of coffee every day just to continue my study. And we found it really difficult to concentrate. But how we got start with the physical part, sleeping patterns, we change our sleeping patterns, help ourselves, and then we eat and drink every 2 hours to maintain the physical energy. That probably will help the energy building for to develop the concentration period of time. And then the emotional one, we probably wanted to make a long phone call to a friend or have a conversation, a longer conversation with a family member once a week. I mean, remember, this is from an example. You can always have your own strategies to look into, but always concentrate on the 4 areas. So physical, emotional, mental and spiritual. Like, you probably want to go to have a reflection time. You go on for a half an hour walk. The half an hour walk is connected with physical, but also the time for you to reflect, go through the self-efficacy. And probably you're also doing some thinking while you're doing walking as well. And spiritual, like you can treat others with respect and kindness, that might also bring a lot of energy back to you so you can concentrate a lot longer in your on your study tasks. And finally, this one is a check-in and the evaluation sheets of all the strategies we use. We found students actually found them quite useful in this way. So the students can look into each strategies they actually developed, they have used in step 3 and reflect on them. So for example, the strategies we just talked about, we go to bed before 11 p.m. and ensure 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And in these ones, the students even highlighted, the week when they use that. So she used that on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and leave the other days off. So because she put a note here, difficult to apply for weekends, have high energy and be better engaged in the performance. So she found if she's going to bed earlier and follow this pattern, the new strategies on Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesday, and Thursday will really help her to develop higher or longer concentration time. So while we are talking about all this, the students found you can adjust quickly each strategies they have been using. If say, for example, it's not working, some of the strategies probably you were thinking initially will work really well. But after you practice it for a week or 2 weeks, you do not find it's working. In this way, you can quickly adjust to this strategy by either removing those not so helpful strategies and or expanding those really helpful strategies to use themselves. And by building all these 4 different steps of strategic steps of strategic well-being kit, we hope we can really provide our university students a great understanding of themselves and what really would support to renew their energy. Remember, the energy comes from 4 different areas, and each student's case by case, they are very, very different. Even when we interview the 35 students, every single one are different to each other. So what we have done so far is we provided you with aims and purpose and goals. And we also talk about our theoretical backgrounds, and we provided you with some great examples of our research findings. And then we shared with you quickly about some practical 4 steps of strategic sheets or for the well-being kit you can use. And we hope you found them useful in this way. And Leigh, do you have anything to add?
Oh, just that, we understand university life can be stressful, but you can use that stress as well as a way to sort of get to those end goals, but you have to work with it, and you need to do things like the 4 steps and understand that there are definitely strategies that can help and work to support you to sort of achieve those outcomes that you're hoping to get. Not just HDs and high distinctions for every unit, no, but the learning and sort of the journey and the pathway of what it is to be in and around higher education, which can be a really fun journey. But thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. And I think we'll now hand back to Geraldine.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thanks, guys, for the presentation. I think it was really great. We have, well, I think one really interesting question from, I'm sorry if I pronounce this wrongly, Umawati, who wants to do a collaborative comparative study with you in Malaysia. So I think we'll take this, I'll get them to respond to you directly. I'll send the questions over. But with that, actually, there are some questions that are quite interesting. So what can educators do when a student goes to them in emotional distress? Like, it's not an easy situation. It takes a lot of bravery and courage from the student's perspective also to talk to a teacher about it. So when you receive this sort of student coming to you for help, like a better word, how would you actually approach this situation?
Well, I literally had that happen 2 days ago, so I'm happy to deal with this one first. And for this particular student, it was working in group work. So there'd been a breakdown in communication with their group members, and there was very high tensions. So the first thing that we do is to listen. And I think that's really important. And being a good listener is actually takes a bit of skill in order to sort of process what it is that's going on. Then think about strategies to solve and help a situation, but also understanding that within any university structure, there's also support networks for things that we're not qualified to deal with. So we have psychologists and counselors who work in university institutions, and they're there to help with some of those particular nuanced needs of the student cohort. And so from that perspective, then we can deal with the day-to-day management of what it is to teach our units and do our make sure students get through their satisfactory academic results. We can be good listeners and reflect on what we see and what we hear, but also knowing that as a lecturer, you need to be aware of the support networks that are available within your institution, then in order to be able to fully support the student with their own sort of mental state and well-being and all of those components. But thank you, Geraldine.
Thanks, Leigh. Gretchen, you have anything to add for that?
Yeah, I totally agree with Leigh, because if it is urgent, I really suggest the students contact the counselor or the professional clinical psychologist. They would provide really good strategies for the students to basically solve the really acute events or some of the stress at that time. But then if by long term, I would strongly recommend the students make, different kinds of appointments with the counselor, but also coming back to the lecturers, because we could help them, like what I just provided, the energy building strategy, 4-step strategy. And the students are most welcome to go through them and discuss them with their peers, with us, with the academics.
Yeah, I think this goes really in line with what Leigh was sharing about whole support system. It's not just about friends that you know back home and like childhood friends and family, right? It's also people that you find in the new environment, your lecturer who reached out to, and the counselor and all that. I am a little bit more conscious of time, and we have time for one question that just came in from Ai Ting Huang. So she thanks you. I'm curious about what are some common challenges you encounter when supporting students in this self-help process?
This is a very good question. In fact, when we are helping our students, particularly a lot of them going through these self-helping strategies a lot of time, we found a lot of them actually still trying to go through a bit of ad hoc strategy. So they're going through, this is going to help, and then I'm going to work on this, rather than going through the systematic way. So what we really would be helping, like what Geraldine, your sage are doing wonderful job here, is to help our students to understand systematically why and what happened and why it happened, and how I'm going to go through that by using a whole system. So a student's a system or an agent in a system. So how a student really function in this part is the whole constructs, the university constructs work. So if I'm going to say, how I'm going to answer this question, yes, we will need to really help them to understand the system, who you are. And what would, and then we go through these particular different areas to look into the best way to support this particular student. But at the same time, the students will also be honest to themselves. The more honest you are, because this is self-evaluated, we are not going to check it. We're not going to mark it. Nobody's going to grade it. But if you're honest to yourself, then you go through the system, and find the best way to deal with the situation, and then seek support from the university system. They should be able to pass. In the way of, I'm making assumption here, but they should be able to have the kinds of the necessary support and find the best strategy for themselves.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of consistency about how honesty is so important. But with honesty, that comes also a huge need of self-awareness, right? To be able to be honest with yourself.
Yes.
How do you think like students are able to reflect better to gain more self-awareness, you think?
There are different ways of doing reflections. And because of the time, I'm aware of the time, but there are many, many different ways to do reflections. The reflections, in fact, it can be done, for example, we can do a narrative inquiry way. So we ask ourselves a question. And by going through what we have done, the activities, what we have done, and then we can go through and then find the answer to ourselves. That's what we call the narrative inquiry kinds of reflection. Or some other reflection can go through peer reflection. So I could go and ask a friend to give me a bit of rating and help and say, am I doing okay? Am I, to find the confidence. It comes to the end, it's again finding the reflective way, the methods is a tricky one for you, for other people, in the way.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's like all about tapping back into the whole support system. We
Yes.
are at time, but there's a very interesting question from Muhammad Alufi to say, like, do you think the cultural aspect may impact students' well-being?
Yeah, and I mean, I work in an institution at Monash where I actually don't teach a domestic student at the moment. All of my students are international, and so they're getting used to the culture of Australia. They're sort of coming from their own cultural backgrounds as well. So yeah, Mohammed, absolutely. The culture really plays a significant role because it's part of those, initial constructs of who you are and who you are as a person and what it means to be an academic. And so whether you are domestically in your own country or whatever the case may be, there's a transition to uni, but sometimes there can also be a transition to a new country, a new way of thinking about life, and sort of embracing that and enjoying that, but also realize that it comes with some challenges. But if you're honest with yourself and what's going on, then you can start to sort of not just sort of tolerate things, but you can embrace and move past the challenges that you're having.
I also want to emphasize we should recognize the differences between each other. So do not try to say, I have to belong, so find the belongings into a group, into a particular kinds of everybody belongs to. Everyone are different to each other. So being different is a proud thing, I would say. So if you feel like, your culture is something you're really being proud of, be yourself. And then use your culture's kinds of support, probably from your culture's perspective, to find the energy, to build your energy. I think that's also could be a way to go.
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to Asia Pacific, we are like tons of endless number of cultures, microcultures and everything. And I fully second Gretchen and say that to be different is to be a very proud and good thing. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm conscious of time because I know we have passed already we're already at now I believe it's 4:32 in Australia. So thank you so much for your session, Professor Gretchen and Dr. Leigh. So we will end the session here. There are some more questions coming in, but we will send them over to you guys. And then as Sumitra shared earlier, we will be getting them answered to the best that we can, and we upload it onto our APAC blog, which we will share via a link in the post-webinar email. Within the post-webinar email, you will also receive a YouTube link. So in case I saw some of you guys probably due to daylight saving mode that just kicked in, some people's timing got a bit mixed up. So you'll definitely get the recording via YouTube as well. So you can just check it out. Yeah. But thank you so much for the speakers and a really powerful session. I think I myself will probably apply this, and I'm not a student, but I think it's very, very beneficial.
Great. Our pleasure.
Thank you so much. Okay, with this, we'll end the webinar. Sumitra?
Yes, thank you, everyone. That's it for today, and hope everyone enjoyed. We will be ending our session now. Thank you.
Take care. Bye.